Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Frank. Frank, you hear me?
Hey mate, how you doing?
What's up, man? I've mentioned you a couple of times, not by name per se, but your idea, because you're the one that gave me the idea about future beings, where I was like, at first I was like, all right, look, I've been talking about UFO stuff being tech, like high advanced tech, because I heard a podcast with the ex-CIA guy, Mike Baker, on Joe Rogan. Um, but the future thing just threw me through a loop where I was like, I mean, I've seen the picture that I think everyone like talks about when it comes to time travel, which is a person at a Mike Tyson boxing match with an iPhone. And at the time, you wouldn't have had an iPhone at that period in time. But I always bring up the point of like, well, you could go to the Evander Holyfield fight. If you're going to see Mike Tyson fight, you got to watch him bite somebody's ear off. But, I just wanted to get, if you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you get this, like, all this information about alien stuff, or if anything, especially the future hypothesis, I would say. I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, sure, Robbie. So my name's Frank Milburn. I'm a former UK military intelligence officer. Um, I'm also a member of the Scientific Coalition for Unidentified Aerospace Studies. And I've got two white papers published by a globally ranked Israeli think tank on UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. These were the Pentagon's UAP task force and American development of UAP technology, a fait accompli. Those papers looked at in depth at the UAP issue in terms of the implications, the potential threats. They looked at UAP technology, weaponry, countermeasures. They also hypothesized the origins and the potential, not so much the intentions, but certainly the origins of certain UAP. As in, what are the intelligences behind them, and also delved into the strategic implications, the desire on the part of the United States, or the necessity to acquire this technology before adversaries like Russia and China do. So that's really where I come at the UAP issue from. But I've got an incredibly open mind about it, because one thing that you realize when you delve into this topic in a big way is it's just one big rabbit hole. And the more you go down it, the more rabbit holes appear. It's like a rabbit warren. Yeah, you go down the hole, and there's loads of branches branching off, and there's lots of different sort of subtopics within the overall UAP topic. Some people come at it from it's just like nuts and bolts, and there are aliens inside. Other people come at it from a more maybe holistic view that it could be a mixture. Future humans. Extraterrestrial hypothesis is a very popular one. Interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, something that's some intelligence that lives in the deep oceans or deep underground. There are a lot of different theories. Some people, they will cling to like one theory or another because they don't like another one. I keep a very open mind, because at this point, outside of a very close circle in the classified world, we simply don't know, and we simply don't have proof. Now, if we're talking, for example, about the future human hypothesis, I speak to a number of sources, both in the intelligence and the scientific communities, who have in-depth knowledge of this. But I personally have no proof, and I'm not going to put forward their identities. So everybody just has to take it as as a theory or as a hypothesis, because I'm not offering any of this as fact.
Well, I opened up the idea of that there might be a way to time travel, because when they started talking about entering other dimensions, it really kind of opened up my mind, because I would have never thought that we would even have the technology close to that, or we wouldn't even understand that there was other dimensions. You hear about the meditation stuff of like entering 5D or all that, but when the government tells you, yeah, we can start looking into other dimensions, and then you see Bill Nelson from NASA make a statement. See, my thing is that a lot like recently with the Freedom of Information Act, that the Black Vault website has just went under a certain report to disclose some information that happens to do with UAPs. They denied it. They said, no, we don't need to give you a detailed report on this, which I expected, because I think a lot of people think that they're owed like information about this. And I'm like, no, they don't ever have to tell you anything. They choose what they want to tell you. They're giving you, like, it's kind of like a compliment or a gift like you get on Christmas. You expect one, but you necessarily don't deserve one. And it just has me thinking a lot, because if you really, I don't think they care about frightening people, because they wouldn't have done what they did with this pandemic, where they made it seem like every third person you knew was going to die. And we know it's not that. So with the UAP stuff, why don't they just say it's aliens? Why don't they say it's something, but they said adversaries, which made it seem like an inside kind of mark. Like me and you are talking, but we could say something that maybe someone else listening that we know is listening would get because it's a secret kind of like inner message or you have to know. And I feel like that's what he was doing because he said adversaries like, hey, if you're another country watching this right now, we know you have tech, you better keep it on the down low, which I think that people underestimate the government, but I don't know. What's your thoughts? Do you think it's other beings? Do you think it's future beings? What do you think it is?
Um, I personally believe, based on the people that I talk to, that it's a mix. Some people have kind of misconstrued what I've said, especially on Twitter. And that's mainly because of their own kind of cognitive dissonance and they don't want to accept anything apart from the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But people that I talk to who are highly credible and highly intelligent and who work in that world, shall we say, they are believe very credibly in the future human hypothesis. Now, I don't discount the extraterrestrial hypothesis also as well if we look at the new book that came out, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. Yeah, I read that recently back to back with the previous book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. Was the program, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications program, which was a DIA program, and that was heavily invested in looking at all kinds of phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. So you had kind of poltergeist activity, you had cryptids, you had what appeared to be kind of like interdimensionals, a small portal with a creature coming through, a large portal that the rancher would see UFOs flying in and out of. He'd be there at night on his porch and he'd see a hole open up in the sky, and on the other side would be daylight and he'd see UFOs flying out of it. So just in that one place, you could say, okay, is that aliens? Is that time travelers? Is that something, kind of more paranormal? We just don't know. I think problem with the UFO community is a lot of people have kind of like very fixed ideas, and it's also kind of paradoxical because they mistrust the government. They probably mistrust me as well because of my background. They mistrust a lot of people who are in intelligence or in the defense area, and but yet they demand answers from them. They demand answers from the very government, from the very intelligence community, and from the very Department of Defense that they've distrusted for so many years, and state have been running a cover up for decades, which they have. So it's paradoxical that they expect answers from them. And I think if you look at, and I like to use the submarine example, if you take prominent people like Luis Elizondo or Christopher Mellon, who've been pushing this UAP issue, especially with Congress and with the public. If we were not talking about UAP, if we were talking, for example, about advanced submarine propulsion or the next generation fleet ballistic missile submarines or the next generation nuclear attack submarines, we wouldn't expect the government or the Navy to be just giving us answers about the systems and what they do and where they are, would we? We wouldn't be expecting that information. So people need to understand that UAP technology is like the prize. It's the post-quantum revolution in military affairs, and whoever acquires it is going to be is going to have global total spectrum dominance for the foreseeable future. So that's a big reason why the government doesn't release what it knows about UAP.
Well,
That's not
also,
the only reason, but it's a big reason why, because you don't want adversaries to find out about it.
Well, also a big point as well too is that when you get to be extremely vague on what this is or that, you can get funding pretty easily. The weird part is I start we look at Elon Musk, we look at Bezos, we look at NASA, for instance, for a long time in the States was our only space program. Now you have billionaires that are doing that adventure. So would it be easier to put one of these billionaires to help you out and bring out the name of NASA again? Or would it be easier to maybe have one of these billionaires do your missions? And if something goes wrong, the billionaire's the one that's going to get the blame from Twitter and all the people of the world that are going to be hating that one person for maybe causing a life to end from an explosion in a space thing from I have no clue. Could be I guess a malfunction of one of the equipments. The weird thing is that I'm not seeing any clear evidence. I'm seeing a lot of breadcrumbs, and then you're letting the people in this community run off with these breadcrumbs, which leads in a certain way that's eventually going to have them devise their own little idea of what this is, and that's when it becomes toxic because no one ever wants to listen when they talk about something that they believe in. Now, if everyone has their own separate beliefs, it's hard to understand, which I come at it with an open mind. I don't trust the government at all. but I'm not going to shame anybody or say that someone's wrong or maybe discredit someone or not trust anybody who's involved with it. I just think there's a reason why they don't tell you the things that they do because a lot of the public does not like stuff that the government does. It's good for research, but bad in like the eyes if you want to be deemed as ethical. But what country's acting ethical anymore?
Yeah, and I mean, the U.S. government. Okay, it's supposed to be for the people, by the people, for the people. That doesn't mean that everybody's got an automatic right to know about its most top secret weapon programs. Okay,
Yeah.
you asked about getting billionaires involved. No, I think the most likely, my theory is, and I've asked Chris Mellon about this, but he hasn't responded. Usually he responds pretty quickly when I ask him questions. Is that Luis Elizondo, former head of ATIP, and Chris Mellon, they are not interested so much in the disclosure aspect. Yes, they want to have some transparency to the public, but their goal is basically to take all these various, unacknowledged special access programs, which have been working on, anti-gravity UAP technology for the past 70 years. Eric Davis has said that, you get bottlenecks in these programs. You can't just go and talk to somebody outside of the program. So I believe, my theory is that Elizondo and Mellon want to bring these programs under one overarching program, like a Manhattan Project 2 type scenario with 23, 24 upwards billions of dollars allocated towards it. And I covered that extensively in my second paper, American Development of UAP Technology, a fait accompli, where Luis Elizondo basically said as much, that once Congress he says, once Congress realizes the importance of the UAP issue, then I believe that the funding will be there, right? So if people have a look at that paper, then they'll kind of understand where my theory is coming from.
Is this type of like secret information that's going to just be locked from the public forever? Like the amount of people that are pushing for Freedom of Information Act to do anything more than just whatever they want to release, like get secret stuff. Like we still don't have the JFK files, so I'm not banking on them releasing government other stuff when it comes to UAPs, but I'm curious to your thoughts of like, do you think this is just going to be classified stuff that's only going to be for higher ups, much like how Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong once said that space should be unique for the people that are trained and spend all that time training to go up there, not just send up William Shatner because you can.
No, I think that the military aspects of it will definitely be kept secret. I mean, as I said, if we go back to the submarine scenario, I mean, would you expect the U.S. Navy to tell you about the latest acoustic coating for their latest submarine, or the ultra silent propulsion system, or the signature management of their submarines? No, of course you wouldn't. So why would that be any difference in the UAP sphere? In terms of people being informed by the government as to what they are. Yeah, the government hasn't got a good record on this at all. And if we look at the latest report last June from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the UAP Task Force, they were pretty vague as to what these craft could be, as in what's behind them. But if we go back, and I mentioned that book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, we know now that under the ORSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, we know that there were two reports. One was delivered in June of 2009, which was now we know it's called the Tic Tac UFO Executive Report, and I think it's like an 11-page report on the Nimitz incident in 2004. And that report said, the anomalous aerial vehicle that was encountered by Carrier Strike Group 11 is not in the inventory of the United States or any other country. So they were staying right back then. It's not adversarial, right? It's something else. But yet it's taken 12 years later. And the latest report from the ODNI is more vague than the one that we now know about from 12 years ago. In addition, we also know that ORSAP delivered to the DIA an additional 141-page report in December 2010, which was detailing the advanced physics of the Tic Tac UFO that was seen in 2004. And that was obviously went into a lot more depth than the previous report, the report from the previous year.
Well,
So
it's not
there has
hard to
been disclosure.
yeah, but it's not hard to go in depth when you keep it so vague. Like it's still very, very vague in the grand aspect of they're not outright saying it, and they're actually putting it under an umbrella branch now where it's unidentified aerial phenomena. Phenomena makes people in their mind trigger to supernatural stuff, paranormal
Yeah,
stuff as well too. I mean it's a good method of like working around or trying to cut around the corners in some aspects, but like that Avi Loeb thing that came out, he acknowledged the fact that they're cloning things and they're making artificial life and all these types of things. I mean, we knew that with CRISPR in a sense, but CRISPR was supposed to be used to be able to fix like genetic anomalies. But I think a lot of people aren't hip to the idea that there is that genetic adaptation or that change that's happening that was something he just dropped like it was nothing. And you start to look at like how many people, like I know so many people who are interested in UFOs or Area 51, and I told them to just see the NASA director talk about this, and they go, "What do you? I haven't seen that. What are you talking about?" And it's like because there's so much. It's like seems like with this, I don't know if it was the pandemic, what it was, but it's all like kind of dropped off in some aspects of it too. That's why like when I get into the UFO community, every time I think I'm onto something, everyone's like throwing in this. You threw in a perspective that just blew me out of the water. I was like, "Fuck, future people! Like, what? What are we talking about?" I was like, can I go to the future and make sure I'm not a total screw up? That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think I'm told with the and that there are differing opinions on this, and I just want to give like the caveat, right? I'm not a physicist. Okay, I don't know about temporal mechanics or anything like that. I'm not a physicist. I would actually direct people if they're interested in the future human hypothesis to the book of my colleague at SCU, Dr. Michael Masters, Identified Flying Objects. Now he's an expert on like hominid evolution and other aspects of evolutionary change in humans, biomedicine. So he's actually has produced a very interesting book. He talks about the potential evolution, how we could evolve as humans, like into the grays. But he does it from a scientific perspective. He talks very much about causality. He talks about time paradoxes, time loops. It's quite a big, hefty book, but it's well worth a read for anybody.
Sounds like enough to give me a headache in a sense. I mean, you start talking about time and stuff, and it starts getting out of like this realm. But I'm surprised at how much information you guys soak in about these topics, especially. I mean, I guess if you're involved with it, you kind of pick it up firsthand. But there's so much out there where I'm like, is it just maybe the reason why a lot of people aren't super interested into it now is because it is very confusing and they're just waiting for a final response? Like, I feel like that's sometimes when they keep dropping little like breadcrumbs, and I'm like, I'm gonna wait till the ending like puzzle piece starts coming together. But you don't know how long that's going to be. One thing you see this, next thing you see another thing, and it just seems like a very big push for funding in a way. Like the way that they stay so vague, the way that says we might need to stay on top of this. I'm like, that's somebody that's asking or trying not to really outright ask for money, but looking for investors that would be involved in this type of thing, which leads to the point of like, why hasn't anybody reached out to Elon Musk or Bezos?
Yeah, but they wouldn't. They are not actually involved in producing kind of weaponry for the United States government. So it
Who
would
says
be
weaponry? It's a spacecraft. It might have weapon capabilities, but it's a spacecraft. That's all it is. Look, you're going to help us. You get to be tax exempt. That's how they sales pitch it, and then they run off with it.
yeah, no, it would be what I understand. It's carried out by by a large defense contractor. It's out of their own profits. Um, People who already companies that already do work for DoD or Department of Energy. Okay, they carry out these programs in unacknowledged special access programs so that it's out of the purview of the public. You can't do Freedom of Information Act for them. And these craft, both the reverse engineered kind and the retrieved kind, are made available to the US government as and when they require them. But no, I don't think they would go to. They might go to Elon Musk one day, um, but no. So far, it's it's large defense contractors that would do that type of work.
When it comes to the idea of future tech, and then you also said like, well, you said future. You said is it future people, and then you also said something about our tech as well too. So I heard you mention in that Twitter space three types of tech. You mentioned like other world, which means like it might be off planet, it might be something from else there, and then you mentioned our tech that we might have modified it, which it seems like likely. I mean, I stick with Bob Lazar. He was the one that first got me interested in this when he first did like that documentary a long time ago with Jeremy Corbell. I was really interested in his thoughts, but as I talk about Bob Lazar, people really do not like his interpretation or his thoughts that he has about this topic.
Well, I just think that there are much better sources than Bob Lazar, and I don't criticize anybody who has done films about him or who publicizes him. I'm not offering a critique of that. I just think that there are much better sources that you can follow than Bob Lazar. Personally, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, what's wrong with what he said though? Or is there anything wrong with what he said?
I just think there's too many doubts about what he said. There are doubts about his credibility, but no, I don't really get involved in that whole argument. That's like a whole thing, and that just kind of like goes straight by me. I'm more interested in what people in the intelligence and science communities are telling me, people whose credentials I've actually established. people that I know through other people who work in the intelligence community in other areas, people who I can verify for myself as credible sources. I'm a former intelligence officer, so I'm not going to go with sources that I can't pin down and verify in a nutshell.
I'm just trying to find ones that would be open for someone like myself or other people out there. And the most popular one, at least for me, would be Lazar. But then there's other ones that I've discovered along the way too that are pretty interesting to look at too. There's just not a whole lot of like, besides a Skinwalker book, and I've talked to TJ about the Skinwalker show that he makes. A lot of it is trying to, keep the show going in a sense. Like if it's dropping off or leaving a cliffhanger so you tune into the next episode. That's what the Skinwalker at the Pentagon thing to me, because the way that it's all coming out and being described, black holes and all these types of things that are creating UFOs, it's like, are we in a scene from Hellboy? Like I would think that it would be sporadic all over the place, not all in one giant area like Stranger Things. But I don't, like I said, I don't know because I'm not keen to all this information. But just logically thinking, it's like this seems like a person that's just trying to profit off of a topic that they know they can leech the shit out of.
Yeah, but also we are getting information now from a former DIA program that was actually looking at it. So that wasn't run for profit. That was paid for by the taxpayer, right? And for the Defense Intelligence Agency. I can't speak for the show, but I can speak to my knowledge of Colonel John Alexander, who appeared as a consultant on the show, and he was actually at Skinwalker before the National Institute for Discovery Science, even there, when Bob Bigelow first bought the place, right, in the early 90s. Colonel John Alexander, for those who don't know, he was dubbed by Lou Elizondo as the godfather of everything weird and spooky at the Pentagon. And I've been talking to the Colonel for like well over a year now. No, I trust what he tells me implicitly. And if he tells me that there are portals and entities and precognitive sentient phenomena operating at Skinwalker, then I believe him. The guy's a decorated Vietnam War Green Beret officer. He spent years and years at the Pentagon running, multi-billion dollar, black and white programs. He is extremely knowledgeable. And I've also spoken to another scientist who was at Skinwalker as well. So there's no doubt in my mind what's going on there. I think there's a lot more that's going on there that the DIA haven't told us, and that would be for obvious reasons. But in terms of the show, yeah, I mean, they have to do some commercialization of it. They're going to leave you on a cliffhanger. But if you look at some of the podcasts from the people who are there, like one of the security guys, there's so much going on there that he said that, they basically show about, probably like, I don't know, 5 to 10% of what's actually going on there, because so much weird shit is actually happening there. But there's no doubt in my mind that weird things are going on there, just from speaking to people who have been there.
Yeah,
So I approached it like, I approached it like that even before I started looking at the show. And if you read the book, the first book, and then the second book, it becomes even more apparent. If you just put the show out of your mind and read the books.
I'm not shutting it down. I'm just being skeptical here because I would like to see some footage that would involve these things that people explain. I'm getting it from a person that I don't know personally. It might be good for you, but for the public or people that don't know these people or haven't even heard of these people before, it's very, very hard for them to really be full 100% in, which is what I think the kind of community needs in an aspect of things. I think it needs a lot of people behind it. And sadly, everybody's on their own sides and forming their own groups and their own opinions of how this goes. And this is why I think this is I mean, at least on the Twitter aspect of things, it's pretty sparked up in popularity in some aspects. It's about up there with academic Twitter.
Yeah, I could see, how it's very difficult to be accessible for a lot of people. I mean, look, I'll be honest, it's very difficult. It's very inaccessible for me at times, right? And I'm kind of heavily immersed in it. There's so many things. And when I started, for example, hearing about the future human hypothesis, I mean, I thought about time travel before. We've all seen the movies and stuff, but it's really kind of mind blowing to get your head around it, especially when very credible people are talking to you about it. Things at Skinwalker. I started out 4 years ago. I started getting back into kind of like the UFO field. And I was still thinking very much in terms of like nuts and bolts craft, and it's probably like extraterrestrials, but since then, talking to people and going down different rabbit holes, my mind has taken sort of many different directions, but it's still very difficult for me to get my head around. All I can do is really keep an open mind and do more research and speak to more people. But it is inaccessible to the vast majority of people unless you're following the minutiae of it. And let's face it, most people have got what they perceive to be more important things for their lives. People need to go to work, they need to pay the rent, they need to pay bills. Even for people who are 100% full on this kind of topic the whole time, it's very, very difficult to try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I get it. It's got to be stressful too. I've been in many Twitter spaces where people just seem like they're just done talking about it at points because they have to reiterate the same thing over and over again to each individual person for them to fully grasp or understand kind of the aspect of, what they know or what their mind or whatever they're on, or like whatever their theory or thought about this type of thing is. I mean, it's stressful. I talked to Chris when he was on my show, and he seemed like he was getting tired of explaining his experience and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I get it. I mean, it's basically got to talk to every single person and tell them this whole entire, like, it's not a long thing. I mean, it's not a short thing. It's a very long kind of little thing that they have to explain so you understand everything of it too. Best thing that we can possibly do to even highlight this topic is just get more people talking about it and recording stuff where people can listen to it again and be like, okay, go listen to that. Go listen to this. That's all I hear now is go listen to this. Go listen to that. So I'll go and listen to that. I go and listen to this. But the time travel thing is just, I was like, I heard you say it. I was like, I have to talk to you and get your thoughts on that. Cause I mean, that opens up doors to so many different things. I used to talk about with my buddy who was on recently, an astrophysicist. I was like, what about space colonization? I started realizing space colonization is never going to happen. It's already been weaponized. Everyone's already out there trying to get at each other. Everyone's trying to be number one. Everyone's trying to do this and that and steal information from each other. The idea of a perfect utopia is not going to be on Earth. It's not going to be on another planet until we can set aside our differences. And that's if something bigger is out there. And that is the whole alien thing. At the start of this, when I started getting interested in this topic, was I hope it is something like that, because that would really get a bunch of people's kind of buttholes puckered up in a way to where they could, put down their differences.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are huge differences on the topic. Even within like kind of ufology, which is why I kind of came. I don't really consider myself a ufologist. I consider myself to be so a national security analyst, a strategic analyst. A guy who's into geopolitics and strategic studies, and who sees the UAP, and not just kind of the UFO aspect of it, but the whole phenomena aspect of it as something of strategic significance, but also of course for consciousness, for society, in terms of technology, in terms of kind of human evolution. That's the way that I come at it, because I think ufology itself has got so much baggage for the years. It's been ridiculed over the years by the government, by the press, but certain ufologists and people in the field, because there have been kind of charlatans and shucksters, I think you say in America, who have brought discredit on it from people who are genuinely trying to explore the topic. So in a way, certain people in ufology have created the conditions whereby other people can ridicule ufology quite easily, just because they state absolutely crazy things, which are seemingly crazy as fact. That's why I'm always very, very careful. I mean, if you look at my first paper, I've got emails from some prominent people, and I can say, okay, this person has stated this person has stated that. But when I'm talking about something like future human hypothesis, I'm very careful to say it is a hypothesis. I'm not stating it as fact.
Yeah. Well, that's what I really appreciate, because you are. I can tell you're open minded as a person. You'll listen. You haven't shut me down once when I went off on something, and I think that's important because communication is kind of key in a lot of aspects when it comes to this stuff. But it does get to that point where like I'll hear something and you don't want to laugh and you don't know if they're messing around with you. Like when you brought up the time thing, the first thing I was like, is he messing with me? Like, I've never heard of this before. I've never seen this. I've never met anybody that's ever talked about this before. And it's kind of like a mental thing too. Like you can't, if someone says they identify as this, like an astral sign or a cat, you don't want to laugh because that might have hurt that person. So when I heard, time hypothesis, I was like, is he fucking with me? I don't know. But then you start going into it more in depth. I'm like, okay, so there's actual stuff here that I'm not keen to. Let me learn some more. But you see that with the UFO community. You see that with any community, I think, out there. There's exploitation, there's creation, there's a bunch of different stuff that goes out there that really blends in and makes it very hard to come across some actual, I guess, evidence of substance, which I think like it's important that, you tackle it with a rational rational perspective of things too. You're more about talking about like, look, I don't know, these are hypotheses. Anybody that prefaces anything with this is a hypothesis or this is someone to listen to because they understand that there's not proven. So many people run with information that has no steam behind it, saying that it's 100% fact without like, and with that 100% definitiveness, I go, there's no definitives in life. The only definitive's death. So I think that's a good way of tackling it the way you kind of have.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, that's why. I mean, I'm not from a scientific background, but that's why, like I was very happy when I was, invited to apply to the Scientific Coalition for UAP studies, because you've got people there with a very firm scientific background, who look at, the physics of it, the physics of UAP, and they produce some outstanding reports on it, and those people, are very much grounded in reality. But even the SCU will get flack by, kind of debunkers, people who come at the subject with the mindset that UAPs can't possibly be anything except advanced terrestrial technology. Therefore, we're just going to try and fit the narrative, our narrative, that it cannot possibly be anything else. Whereas I think SCU comes at it and said, like, we don't know what it is, but let's try and figure out the physics and figure out, is it something that we could have? And as that report from 2009, from ORSAT to the DIA, the anomalous aerial vehicle is not anything in the inventory of the United States or any other power on Earth. And I think that's where you need to come at it from, because once you do that, then you can try and figure out, what the intelligences are behind these craft. And future human hypothesis is just one of them. I mean, extraterrestrial is perfectly valid, as are a number of other hypotheses. The truth is, I think that very few people outside of certain classified programs are really going to know. And I believe the US government does have an idea where some of these, they do have an idea where some of these craft, if not are coming from, what the intentions and identities are of the intelligences behind them. And that's based on, the people that I talk to. Future human hypothesis is just one of them. But there's all kinds of conspiracy theories out there. There've been conspiracy theories for years. Some may be true, some may be not true, but you've got to be very, very selective in terms of your filters and what you're actually reading and who you're speaking to, I think.
When did the shades finally come off for you? Like when did you finally kind of see that there was more? Like you started to dive into this?
I think really, yeah, the last 4 years, and certainly kind of like 2000 and 2019 when I started thinking about writing a paper, and then 2020, last year when I actually started, writing the paper and researching and talking to people like, Colonel John Alexander. Because once you're speaking to people like that who've been working at the heart of government, you're talking to scientists who've been working on UAP programs, who've worked for the DIA, who've been doing remote viewing for years. I mean, those kind of people really open up your mind, and that's really, I think, where the kind of the shades over my eyes the blinkers started to kind of fall away. But I'm not saying I have all the answers. It seems to me the more you go down these rabbit holes, the more there's more questions than answers, right? And that's very, very true. There's always more questions than answers, and you come up against something else. You're like, what the hell is that? How do I explain this? How does this fit into like UFOs, right?
Yeah.
Because traditionally, no one. I mean, what a poltergeist? What's poltergeist activity got to do with UFOs? I think what's interesting, if you look at the high strangeness article by Dr. Eric Davis and Jacques Vallée, I mean, they talk about the high strangeness, about how you can't just look at like UFOs or UAP in isolation, and you have to look at like the kind of the weird strangeness factor of it as well.
What do you think about the AE5 or that projection app, the one that you can call aliens?
The one from Stephen Greer.
I guess it's like a $10 app. I had a buddy that was mentioning it to me before, and I was like, $10 is a lot for an app, even if you're summoning aliens.
Yeah, I think if people are expecting you to pay for enlightenment, then you probably might want to consider why.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Also with projecting, what do you think about like the idea that a lot of people's dreams or maybe these kind of occurrences where they experience something that might seem so real? Do you think that it might be something projecting, or do you think that it's just a way that your brain reacts to something?
No, I think I believe very firmly in ethereal projection, the projection of your physical consciousness and the kind of plane of existence that we're on. And I believe very firmly in astral projection, the projection of kind of physical consciousness and dream consciousness into into other dimensions and other realms. I believe very firmly in that, and I've kind of dabbled with that in the past. But yeah, I've had ethereal projection experiences where I've been doing meditation on my bed. I've got like two fat cats like on either side, kind of like in my arms like that, and I've been kind of floating above. I get into a very very relaxed state after about half an hour. And then I'm floating above my bed, and I'm actually looking down, and I can see myself and the cat's asleep. And then it's like bang, and I kind of jump awake like that, and I'm kind of like back in the room.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe very firmly in it.
What do you think about, because I've heard so my kind of skepticalness kind of leans a little bit also into the UFO stuff when it comes to, I heard an alien encounter experience about three lights in the sky. And then not even, I think almost a year later, about 300 something episodes later, from a separate person, heard the same exact experience described in the same exact way, where it was like a triangle in the sky, but as you moved, it's like how my hand moves. It would turn like this, like you would see around the dimensions, like it mastered 2D space. What have you heard of that before? Is that another concept? I think, I don't know if it was you or somebody else that was describing different types of these crafts, like they're from different times that came.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that one specific case. But I mean, there's a lot of weird and wonderful things that happen with UFOs. If you read like my first paper in the Hudson Valley in the New York State area, there's all kinds of UAP that apparently appear to be able to shapeshift, and they can mimic kind of like conventional aircraft, military aircraft. I'm not sure if the mimicry is kind of like mechanical, i.e., they can change shape mechanically, or as Dr. Jacques Sarfati says, it's an effect of kind of like the warp field around them that gives the appearance of shape shifting. But they can certainly, do weird and wonderful things. And also, then there's the other question. I mean, is it something that's being projected onto our consciousness? That we're seeing something that whatever we're seeing is projecting something into our minds, so that we see something else as opposed to what is actually there.
I've heard people explain that that they should be taken like violently, like people that have been I wouldn't say abducted, but experienced, or they've talked about how it was like a forceful thing. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
fun. It wasn't a good experience. And then I've heard people that say that the experience was like good. They felt love. They didn't feel like they were in danger. What are these? What can you take these at face value? I mean, I know you got to understand a person that might experience something, but I think it's kind of hard because they're so like, are they peaceful? Are there different types? Is it just not just one species like we think? Is it multiple?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, yeah, if you have a good experience, you're an experiencer. And if you have a bad experience, you're an abductee, right?
Yeah.
And people will come down very sharp, very hard on one way or the other. People who have been abducted, they've been violated, they've been kidnapped, they've been effectively had illegal experimentation done on them, they've been sexually abused or raped, right? Um, and if you're an experiencer, it's kind of like, it's wonderful and it's about enlightenment and, evolution and expansion of your mind. I can believe both. And I certainly wouldn't, there've been so many thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cases of abduction, and also of people having experiences. I think you have to take it credibly, just because of, people saying the same things. Now, there may be, people who are making things up, for sure. But a lot of people that I've met, they're certainly not making it up, and they're highly credible people, including sources that I've spoken to, our experiences. So I certainly don't discount it at all. I think there's just too many people saying the same things, and also as well, let's not forget, you've had some some serious kind of academics as well, like John Mack, looking at the abduction phenomena, and doing regressions with people and looking at cases of abductions. It's something that has to be taken seriously, like cattle mutilations. There's just too many of them. If you look at cattle mutilations, for example, as well, you've had, there's too many vets, there's too many law enforcement who've looked at it. There's, the FBI have looked at it. There's, specialist, stock enforcement in various states where they have cattle. You've got like a stock board or stock officers, people who are experts with cattle, and they can't figure out what's happening with these mutilations. And there's been so many thousands of cases, you can't just discount it.
Are
It's
they
one of those things.
mutilated like turned inside out, or are they mutilated and how are they mutilated?
Well, typically they're kind of they can be exsanguinated, but there's no like blood around the area. They have certain organs or removed, whether it's eyes, tongue, or around like the anal area. But it's removed with a kind of a precision, a surgical precision, that it literally cauterizes the wound. Like there's no blood left. And then some of them they look like they've been dropped from like a heavy height, sorry, from a height. Because of the bones broke, whatever. But there's no like blood around the area that you'd expect, and they've been completely exsanguinated. How do you take out all the blood and not leave any blood around around the cadaver? And also there's no tracks or anything leading away from them. So that's what's really really bizarre about it. And there's been many cases like that. So you have to kind of sit up and listen.
With the varying descriptions of what people have seen when it comes to these, I wouldn't say I know aliens is like they don't like that term, but the grays or others. What do you think they are? Like what do you think is the most reasonable one? Because I've heard like like small little ones and then one giant one, which seems more plausible in some aspects. But I think with the amount of how movies have just flooded the market with all these different descriptions, it's hard to understand or think when you start seeing the alien one and then you see the predator and then you see all that. I'm like, I think it's just a blank kind of slate face, small ones and a giant one that has to probably be the leader in some aspects.
The truth is, I don't know, and I'd be suspicious of anybody who said they did. But I think there's probably many different types out there, and I don't know where they're from, whether it's whether it's the future, whether it's the past, whether it's extraterrestrials. I really don't know, but there seem to be a wide variety of craft, and there seem to be a lot of different types of certainly humanoids, and also other types, other even weirder types. So if we're thinking about it kind of like as a human would, anthropomorphic, then we'd probably think, yeah, well, there's more than one species out there. They have different kind of craft, and they look different from each other. That's the only thing that the only kind of logical conclusion that I can come to. But again, I would say maybe in some cases as well, people are having, because there's a lot of there's their research to suggest that that there's telepathic communication. A lot of people report this when they're having experiences or abduction, that they've been telepathically communicated with. So maybe there's some kind of like mind alteration process whereby people are seeing something that is actually different from what's in front of them.
What with the future beings, for instance, or how are they time traveling? Like, do they have a device that's doing it? I can't be like the movies, right? It has to be something more compact.
Yeah, it depends who you're talking to. Like Dr. Jack Savati, he talks about the tic tac, the warp drive. It would be some kind of craft. I'm told by scientists, and scientists are divided on this, that you can only travel back in time, right? You can't travel forward in time. So if you come back in time, the only way you can get back to the future is by physically like living out your life. But as for the actual mechanics and of the machine, you'd have to talk to a physicist about that,
Hmm.
and an engineer.
Is there anything that you on your journey or kind of like your dive into this that you just can't explain, or things that leave you kind of stumped that have you thinking about like possibilities of what maybe this could be or that could be?
Yeah, how about pretty much everything?
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling. I'm just making sure we're in the same boat in that aspect.
Yeah, I
It's
really strongly Robbie, I strongly recommend reading those two books, reading Hunt for the Skinwalker and then reading Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, because it's like just such a bizarre tale.
Yeah,
But
I want to get you to send me, if you can, any links that you've kind of like thought would be interesting for me to look into, because I'd like to have you back on and would actually know some stuff too, so I can be able to hold a conversation. Because, like I said, it's a lot, and everything that I've kind of seen have been things from people talking about especially the Disclosure Project, mostly the secrecy that comes with the government, which I'm super interested in because I like diving in and looking at that, because everything to me just seems obvious, like from a tactical and a country and a military strategic point. But I think people think more personal rather than uh broadband, which I think the government thinks a lot of. Like, they don't know your face, they don't know your names, they don't care how much you stomp your feet. There's no reason for them to give you information if you ask. It's much like a parent that's dealing with a kid. You don't If they ask, they don't care. They have the power in all aspects of things. You're lucky when they do give you something. And maybe that's where it starts, but it seems like for so long, the best way or best course of action has always been to stomp your feet in some aspects and hope that something gets, out there. I just don't like the bait and hook. When they come on screen and they tell me, now we do know that there is something out there. I'm like, what? Okay. Like, you want to insert any more or nouns in there that are going to make it sound so descriptive to where I can't understand what you're saying?
Yeah, I think yeah. I think that people have, since the New York Times article in was it September 2017. I think people have become kind of like spoilt to UAP and kind of like what's actually been disseminated by the government, because for so many years, for so many decades, there's been like very very little dribbling out, um, which has allowed kind of like conspiracies to perpetuate. But I think now people are kind of spoilt because since 2019 there's been 2017 there's been so much coming out now, and major news platforms are talking about it, although albeit pretty superficially. I think now people are just they want more, 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 and they're just not happy with anything that they're getting, and that's understandable. But I think maybe in many cases, the government doesn't necessarily always know what it's dealing with. It knows about some of the things that it's dealing with, but not all of them. But it's certainly not going to share its innermost secrets.
Yeah. Um, it's also weird the time that they release a lot of this stuff happens to be some very weird coincidence timing when it comes to like Fauci and Beagles. Next thing you know, you see a NASA director speaking about something. I'm like, that's a weird release, bro. That's like two of your favorite games coming out on the same exact day, like back to back. It doesn't happen. There's always a day in between.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that the information is becoming hard and fast. And I think people should like take the win and appreciate what they have. Obviously, you always want to have more information, but you've got to understand the limits of what the government is going to provide.
You just got to be careful
And
not to create your own. Like there's people out there that are more than happy to edit a video or rehash something or resurface something that people might have forgot about and say, "Hey, I got new content. Check it out over here." That's the scammy part I don't like. Is like it's so easy to do something that's going to ruin like or taint all the water of this just by creating content because you want to get your name in front of everything, which is like I get it, but at the same time, it's like there's a lot of people that invest a lot of their time and most of their days into this type of thing. Like you're dealing with more than just creating content. You're also dealing with people that are more than happy to spend money or invest their lives into something that they want to know the answer to, whether it's fear aspect or whether it's just a common curiosity.
yeah, as I said, I think you've got to be very, very careful and like filter your sources and look at the motivation for why your sources are saying what they are. But there's some very, very good books out there, and there's some very. I mean, I've been heavily influenced by the likes of John Alexander, David Marler, Keith Basterfield, Richard Dolan. Certainly, his works on UFOs and the national security state. Um, Obviously, Dr. Michael Masters' work done. The reports done by the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. There's some very good bloggers out there, some very good researchers. But again, I think that now the kind of the because people are taking it more seriously, I think the swing is starting to kind of tilt towards kind of like the more sensible, kind of side of the equation. And I think charlatans are being called out a lot more. And look, I've got nothing against people having Patreon or running a blog. People spend a lot of time like blogging, running YouTube channels, and some of them do really really good work. I give a big shout out, for example, Exo Academian, and my friend Jay, Project Unity. Okay, John, I want to know, at Special Access Podcast. People, they should they have got costs, and they spend a lot of time running these things which educate people and put out very very good content and do fantastic interviews. So that's kind of one side of the equation. But then I'd be very very wary of people who are selling the truth, who are basically
Ah, you muted yourself, Frank. There you go.
CE5, or you can learn the truth about aliens, and this is the truth, this is what it is, and I will give it to you for so many bucks. I'd be very wary of that.
Yeah, I have a few people go like, UFO Twitter wants to hear from you. And I'm like, look, I'm just a curious person. That's all. I'm only doing this kind of selfishly. I just want to learn more about this because if there is this future tech or if there's stuff that I can't understand, I'd like to know what it is. And I've come to the sad fact that I'm not going to be able to understand every single thing in the world. But hey, we can try, right? We can try and learn a little bit and understand more, at least so you can have common conversations with people and enhance your own experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, I mean, on UFO Twitter as well, you've got to filter out stuff. There's, some very quality people who are on there. Another one is, a friend and colleague, Ross Coulthart, okay, who's just written a great book on UAP, in plain sight. So yeah, your filters are all important, really. UFO Twitter is a good place for. Um,
Common
there's a lot of
discourse.
yeah, there's a lot of conspiracy and kind of conjecture on there, but you can just follow like a small amount of quality channels or people, and that's really kind of quite sufficient.
Yeah. Frank, you've given me enough of your time, man. Is there a place where people can find you? Your Twitter, your website?
Yeah, I don't have a website. I just mostly do stuff. Anything new that I do is kind of on Twitter at Frank Milburn. And I'll send you through some links, just that I maybe kind of like my favorite authors and kind of links and
Get your books
and
out
uh,
there too, your
and
papers.
and bloggers that I like. But there's some really good stuff out there. But I think the key takeaway that I take, for people who are just starting to delve into the subject for the first time, just be very, very careful, like who you're listening to and what your which sources you're paying attention to, because some are going to be much better quality than others.
I'll make sure to link everything that you're going to send me in the description for people listening to be able to look at the content that you're talking about. And thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank.